What's going on, you guys? This is going to be my 2023 in the bag. Some discs are going to change, but anyways, let's start off with my distance driver, starting with definitely one of my favorite control drivers ever, the Champion Monster. Now, this one is actually a Monster L. I don't know what the flight numbers of a Monster L actually are, but essentially this is a very straight monster. You wouldn't exactly expect this type of flight. Now, it is a 10-speed, feels really nice in the hand, sidearm or backhand. I mean, this is just my favorite. It doesn't go super far, so I can pretty much throw it as hard as I want. The most I'm going to get is like barely turned over, just pretty much flat the whole time. And this has a nice finish to it. It doesn't skip super hard, it skips a little bit, but it's definitely not as overstable as a Monster X. Definitely one of my favorites. But anyways, let's move on to one of my most thrown off the tee, especially in the woods, is my Preken Wraith. You probably have seen this in some of my recent videos, but essentially the Preken Wraith, out of the wraiths I've thrown, this is probably the most straight to understable, so you can get some good distance out of it, but what I really like for it is straight lines or turnovers, things where I really need it to hold a shape. And then at the very end, it still does fight out. It's not that understable, but I really like this for wood shots. Next, we've got my roller disc, I guess you could say. My most understable distance driver, this Pro Starfire. Now, the Pro Starfire is actually a 10.5 -1.2. So if you think about it, it's not the most understable disc of all time, but this one is kind of special. First off, it's older Pro plastic, but it looks like Star Plastic and feels like Star Plastic. Someone said, no, it's definitely Pro, but to me, it's like Star Plastic. I don't know, it's really weird. But it's like warped. I think you can see it right now. It's a bit warped. And for some reason, that just makes this like the craziest, most understable disc ever. It's basically like throwing a Mamba, even. Like an understable Mamba. This thing just will flip. But really what I like to do is I like to have it out in the air and just have it turn and hold forever. Or I can throw it really hard and flat and then just get it to roll. I really like this disc. But I don't throw it off the tee that often. It's definitely more for scramble. But another disc that I actually throw off the tee, we've got this really domey. And I mean really domey. I know it's probably hard to see on the camera. I'm trying to hold it just right. But anyways, it's a huge pop-top Star Wraith. And this is a farther version of that other Preken Star Wraith I showed you. But this one is definitely more stable because it's so domey. It gets like that extra air underneath, and it'll kind of make it fight out. I like throwing this one for distance, to be honest with you. Anything that I have to control but still get a lot of distance, I'll probably go to this. I wouldn't say this is my farthest disc backhand, but it definitely could be. Right now I'm kind of searching for a max distance driver, and I probably will go back to the Pro Katana, but leave in the comments your favorite max distance driver because I might be trying it out. But anyways, we got my trick disc. This is my beat up Blizzard Katana. It's in my grenade video, both grenade videos, the sidearm grenade video and the backhand grenade video. This is the disc that does it all, but I actually might be getting a different grenade flip disc, but this one works pretty well. It's just extremely light. I've heard that the Fury, and I think it's the H5, maybe even the H7 from Prodigy, all those three discs are really good for grenade flip. Now, that's not really what I use this for. Now, if I was just messing around, yeah, I could throw this on grenade flip and have a lot of fun. But what I really like is, you know, just having the craziest understable disc. So if I'm like really pinched off and I only can flick, you know, this is going to get that extra 20, 30, maybe even 50 feet. You know, just something crazy that I have to throw in the air and get to just flip over the whole time or turn into a roller. Like, this one can actually fly, and I think in a massive tailwind, I could throw a 360 and get probably the most distance with this disc, but it is really beat up. It might be time to look for a different crazy understable disc, but for now, this thing is definitely staying in my bag. It's one of my favorites. Now we've got kind of a longer distance control driver. We've got a Star Excalibur. Now, you've probably seen this in some of my recent videos, but the Star Excalibur, I'm not sure why. Sometimes it is pretty overstable. Like, I have an old EcoStar Excalibur, and it is actually overstable. Like, I have to force on Anheuser. This one is kind of flippy for an Excalibur, so I can throw it flat and it'll kind of like turn over a little bit. And then, of course, being an Excalibur, the mold is going to finish and kind of skip at the end. But this one I really do like for longer sidearms. The only issue I don't like about it is it's so flat. Like, I used to have an Excalibur, I don't know if it was on the channel for very long, but it was much more domey than this, and I really liked that. It went super far, either type of throw. This one just doesn't stay in the air as long as that one, but the thing is, it's a great control driver. So I can control this, you know, 420, 450 feet, even on sidearm, like that's a full sidearm, and I don't expect it to really skip off or anything. It's just going to kind of fade and sit in the ground. It doesn't have too much glide, so this one is actually pretty good in the wind, even though it is more understable. Next, we have a replacement for my other Thunderbird. We have a 4X Thunderbird. I had a 3X, but it's got this cool dye. I think you can see it. Kind of reminds me of like marbles, or maybe like a leopard print, but like in algae or something. That's what I think of. It kind of reminds me of like a leopard type of print, but it's green. Anyways, this one is like barely thrown. Maybe I've thrown it like once or twice in the field, and I just have it in my like stash. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be more overstable than my 3X. But I like the Thunderbird because it's extremely straight. It's kind of like a more stable Wraith that doesn't go as far. So it's great for straight lines and pretty much anything where I don't really want much of a finish to it. It's definitely a more mild fade than a Wraith, for example. Now, currently, my longer distance, max distance disc is going to be this VIP World. Now, the only problem is, look how flat this thing is. Now, I will say that it does zoom off, and this one is pretty grippy. So, I'd never really throw West Side or anything like that, but I gotta say, I've had this one kind of laying around for a while. It's been in and out of my bag in the past, and I've decided, hey, why don't I just put it back in the bag? The only problem with this thing is it's not going to be your favorite max distance driver in the open. This is definitely more of a control driver, but it's my farthest disc right now, I would have to say. So this one I can kind of put on anhyzer and then get it to just go flat and then eventually hyzer out. I definitely like it more for backhand, but the thing is, I think the shape of this disc doesn't feel that awkward for sidearm. Some like 13 speeds, 12 speeds even feel kind of awkward for sidearm. This does not feel as awkward. So for now, that's going to be one of my longest, if not my longest disc. Then finally, we have my most overstable distance driver, my Paul Macbeth Star Destroyer. Now, this one is not embossed. It's penned. I know it's probably hard to see, but essentially, I guess that just makes these more stable. I think I have an embossed Paul Macbeth Star Destroyer as a backup for this one, and that one's pretty stable. But I gotta say, I've had this one in the bag for quite a while. You can see like marks and stuff. I mean, like dirt marks or whatever. You can tell it's been in the bag for quite some time at this point, but it is quite stable, and the color is kind of hard to see, but it's bright pink, almost like kind of whitish, so you never really lose this thing. I can throw this thing as hard as I want, flat, and basically it's going to go flat. If I chuck it on anhyzer, it'll hold the anhyzer and then fight out at the end. This one I can pretty much throw as hard as I want, and it's never going to like turn over and roll. It would never do that. I can throw this in any wind that I want. I feel like everyone's got to have a disc like that, but this one still goes far. So this is like up to 450, and I love throwing it into headwinds, right? I don't even have to think about it. Moving on to throwing putters, we only have 4. I used to bag like 5 or 6 even, but a lot of these are exactly the same as before. So we'll start off with probably one of my favorites all around. So I throw this one off the tee for slow, flex, anhyzer sidearms. This is my Champion Avir. It's got 2 rings in the middle, but it's not a San Marino. I don't know if that's actually a big deal. But this thing is pretty stable. I can throw it in the wind, no problem. It goes pretty straight, but it's not one to like flip over. It'll flip up the flat and then hyzer out. But I think the thing that I like most about this disc is not only do I tee off with it, but I really like it for most upshots. I'm not saying I throw it for a lot of upshots, but anything where it's a slight sidearm hyzer, I really like throwing this thing for upshots. And some of my throwing putters I don't really throw for upshots, but this one I definitely can rely on. Next we've got probably my most thrown putting putter, almost 10 years old. It was from 2013 I've been bagging this, so in October 27th, this will be 10 years old in my bag. This is a Pro D magnet. This is my turnover throwing putter, but if I throw it on a lot of hyzer, it won't really turn over and roll. It'll just go straight. So this is a pretty good all-around putter. Definitely like a straight to understable throwing putter. I actually do jump putt with this. Sometimes it's lower profile, so if I just got to get something through a tiny gap, or maybe it's just like a slightly longer jump putt and I want something more direct, I can go ahead and rely on this. I don't normally putt with it except for special situations, but this is definitely one that sometimes I pull out to putt with. Other than that, I do like throwing upshots with this disc as well, but easily the most thrown putter for me off the tee, unless it's a specific type of course. But anyway, we've got probably my favorite throwing putter, the Yeti Pro AVR. Now, I don't throw this one all the time, and the reason is because I throw this one as hard as a driver, and not every hole is going to be like 300 to 330, and that's kind of the distance that I really like to throw this disc. So this one I can throw as hard as I want, sidearm, maybe on a slight angle. It'll be kind of like this. It'll flip up to flat, maybe turn over a little bit, and it just holds it forever, and then eventually it'll fade out. But this thing is very torque resistant. It's got a strange mold that kind of like dips down in the middle. I have a couple backups of this, but easily my favorite throwing putter. Now, for backhand, I don't really use this thing, or I'm not very experienced with it, but for sidearm, it's extremely comfortable, and I throw this one toboggan hole 3 every single time. I just end up in the middle. I can throw it hard. It flips up, just goes straight, doesn't really turn over. Definitely my favorite driving throwing putter, I guess you could say, especially for longer shots. Now we've got kind of a specialty, my most overstable throwing putter, the Innova Hydra. Now this one's really old, and it flips up to flat. If you get any new Hydra, it's just going to dive down. It's basically like a zone, but this one is super beat in, so you can imagine it's going to flip up a little bit, but then it finishes, and it has a little skip to it. So I like this for any water shot, obviously, because this one actually floats in the water. But anything that has to get to the right and is, less than 280 feet, depends on the shape, of course, but, I like this thing up to probably 280 feet, and anything that needs a right finish, I'll go ahead and grab this disc. Moving on to mid-ranges, we only have 3 mid-ranges in my bag this year so far, but really, I only need these 3, it seems like, unless there's a specialty course and I've thrown a disc and it's in my collection and I know about it. But anyways, my favorite disc in my bag, I'm just going to have to say it, other than my putting putter, it's kind of a tie between those two. My Elite X MRV, this is my turnover straight mid-range. You've probably seen this in the video where I'm throwing sidearm angles. This is the hyzer disc. But essentially, this is the same mold as the Innova Rock, but in that crazy, amazing Discraft plastic. I don't know what they did, but the Elite X in some older ESP plastic is pretty good, but this Elite X plastic is easily my favorite. So when you finally find a disc in that plastic that you can throw, I'm serious, just stay with it. It's the best plastic out there. But anyways, this one has a lot of life to it, very flexible. I'm kind of scared to throw in the winter because I just don't want it to break. But this is, I can throw it on any shot I want. Typically, I throw straight to turnover, and it'll just hold it. If I want to throw, I can throw this one up to like 350, I would say, reliably. But it's going to be a big hyzer flip that turns over, and then eventually, maybe it will come back. This is definitely just, it holds any line that you throw it on. Awesome disc. Next, we've got the Star Crow. Now, this is kind of my stable hyzer flip mid-range. So, the MRV, if I throw it on a hyzer, it'll kind of flip up, and then I can make it ride. The Star Crow will kind of just flip up, and then hyzer out again. So, this is good for straight lines. Anything with a little bit of wind where I kind of want it to be straight, but it is overall a stable disc. The only problem I have with crows in general is they're usually a bit too domey. This is almost too domey, but being star plastic, it's got a little give in it, and I actually really like this one. It's not completely flat, but it's definitely not too domey at all. This is probably my straight to stable. Definitely not the most stable. The most stable in my bag is actually the Z MRV. So having the MRV, obviously, I can throw all the plastics of MRV pretty well. I really like the mold. But this Z MRV is actually quite stable. So imagine like a brand new Elite X MRV, which is basically like a brand new rock. Now this one, I actually throw on flex shots. I like kind of throw in those slow flexing shots. And now this is going to be up to like 320 slow flexing shots. And I would say that I can probably throw this up to like 380 to 400 if it's a downhill hole sidearm. And I actually trust this one enough for backhand. I'll throw it as hard as I can. And it'll just go like dead straight. Or if I turn it over, it'll even fight out of that. So this is quite a stable mid-range. It's nothing like a Zone or a Gator or anything of that sort. But this is kind of the disc that, you know, I can throw in the woods. If I'm thrown in the wind, I probably would just throw one of my fairways, which we're about to get to next. But definitely my most overstable mid-range in the bag. Now moving on to my fairways. I think the fairways in my bag are some of the newest additions compared to recent years, because I used to only throw like 1 or 2 fairways in my bag. Now that I can throw a little bit harder and farther and faster, you know, some of my driver shots I opt for fairways instead. And these fairways I think are essential to a lot of shots in my game that maybe I tried to throw a mid-range too hard and I didn't get it every single time. These just are more consistent and they're just farther mid-ranges. That's basically what they are. So first disc is actually newer to my bag. It's a first run X-Clone. Now the X-Clone is supposed to be like a stable Cyclone. It's got some weird rim action, but don't get me wrong, the plastic is really nice. But what I actually use this disc for is my flipping, most understable fairway driver. Now for some reason, I believe this one might be warped somewhere. I'm not exactly sure. It's hard to see. But what I do know is every single time I've thrown it in the field, it turns over like crazy. So this is going to be that like get out of jail free card, the roller that I need when I'm not throwing the Pro Starfire. This is my most understable one. I'm going to have to experiment more. I might switch it out, but for now this is what's going to be my most understable fairway. Next, we've got one step up from that. We've got my favorite hold any line straight. The mold is stable, but it's beat up and used. My DX Banshee, and it has a 2000 stamp on it, so 23 years old in my bag. But the plastic, it's got a pop top. I mean, this thing is so grippy. You can see my thumb just like sinking into it. I actually have a brand new version of this type of Banshee. It's not the same stamp, but it's the same plastic, and it's extremely overstable. Now this one, I actually like to force over flat and just have it go anhyzer and hold. Eventually this thing fights out. So if I throw a hyzer with it, it's not essentially going to roll over. It'll kind of flip up to flat, maybe turn over a little bit, but it definitely hyzers out. This one is definitely just the straightest point and shoot fairway that I have. I think new Banshees are way more overstable than this, but this one's nice and beat in. And I know it's DX, but the plastic is just so nice. It almost feels like it's like gummy star plastic to me. Next, we've got kind of the step up from that. We've got the Discraft Extreme. It doesn't necessarily go as far as the Banshee, I would say. Maybe similar, but it's a 6-speed, not a 7. But this one, what I really like about it is the plastic is like super shock absorbent, super, you know, gummy, bendy. It's never going to break. But as soon as it hits the ground, it just stays. So this is great for anything where there's like a hill. I know it's not going to roll down the hill or anything like that. It's very similar to the Banshee in the way that I can throw it hard, and I know it's not going to turn over, but it's definitely more overstable than the Banshee. I can throw this one pretty much as hard as I want on a hyzer. I'll get it to about here, and then it's just going to dive down. It doesn't go that far, so this is great for like anything under 320 feet. You can throw this one as hard as you want, and you know exactly what it's going to do every single time. But the only thing that kind of sucks about it is it doesn't skip. Now, kind of a step between those two is the TBird 3. The TBird 3 is like a more stable Banshee, flies a little bit farther. What I really like this one for is anything where it's like a dead straight tunnel. I can throw this one as hard as I want, and I know it's going to go up to like 350 feet. I'm sure I could throw it farther, but I usually throw this up to 350 feet And what I noticed is if I throw it flat, it'll flip up to flat and it won't hyzer out for a very long time. So if I throw this on an anhyzer, it actually holds the anhyzer for a lot longer than you'd expect. Being metal flake, it's definitely the most overstable variety of TBird 3. So I really like this for throwing like just tunnel shots. That's really what I use this for. So if there's a tunnel shot where I don't really want the Banshee to flip over, or I need something to go farther than the Extreme, this is where the TBird 3 comes in. And like I said, I trust it up to like 350 feet, going just dead straight, and I love it in the woods. Now, my most overstable fairway, the Luster Whippet. Now, this one was actually given to me by Robert Burge of Lone Star Discs, and he really liked the Whippet. I actually have a backup that he also gave me, but essentially, I really like this thing off the tee. Anything that's like a crazy flex or low ceiling where I need a big skip, that's where this thing comes in, and it is so overstable that if you throw it flat and in the air, instead of it gliding out and then ending left, it'll just kind of tilt down just like a tilt. And trust me, I've thrown it in the wind dead flat trying to get a hyzer and just tilted right into the water. Luckily, I got this one back. But essentially, most overstable disc in my bag, no question. More comfortable to hold than a tilt. It's not exactly flat. It's got a little bit of dome to it. Feels really nice for sidearm. I can throw it for backhand if I had to, too. But anyways, let's move on to my putting putters. You've probably seen them before. We've got the red XPod R. To me, this is the most comfortable turbo disc just ever. I've tried a whole bunch of putters. I actually really like throwing this one too for up shots, just shots in general. I could play any course if I only picked one disc. As long as it's not toboggan, I could pick this disc and probably play the best out of my bag. If it's a longer course, probably the MRV, but this one, like I said, it's tied with the MRV. I just love it. I don't know what it is. I know most people don't like a disc like this. It is relatively understable, but being the Z Classic, it's basically a brand new version of the XPod R. Now this XPod R, you can see it's super warped and whatnot. I sometimes putt with this thing. I would normally use it for like anhyzer putts, but what I actually like is just crazy turnovers or like short rollers with this thing. This is, I love for up shots, longer putts, I guess you could say. Like if I was going to do a backhand jump putt and I really needed to go a bit straighter than I think this one could, I'd probably pull this one out. But I love having this one in the bag. Anytime there's an upshot, I probably use this like 80% of the time. You know, especially in the woods. If we're out in the open, probably a different story. But I really like this disc. I was putting with it for a long time. Now it's too warped, but if I do play a winter round, I'll leave this one at home, you know, just in case. I don't think it's going to break anytime soon. But this one, once it's like super cold, it feels like I'm putting with this one again. So yeah, basically up shots, actual putting. And then finally, I'll show off my mini. It's this MDGO, like Mini Buzz. And I lose minis all the time, or I misplace them, or they break, or I don't know. Just stuff happens to minis. But this is a larger mini, as you can see. It's actually like a Buzz mold, smaller. I think the trick is to get like a bigger mini that you actually like. I've had this one at least since 2018, I think. I believe I've had it since 2018. I could be off on that. But I haven't had to replace it since, and I've got a piece of glow tape in case I play glow. I think that's important. And I guess the other thing, other than like rags and like scorecards and whatnot, is important in my bag is this chalk carrier. Obviously, it's just Tupperware, but you know, being sealed up, I don't expect it to like spill out. And I used to have like a bag for my chalk before. You could try like a Ziploc bag. You could try whatever you want, but I noticed that sometimes it would spill out, and if it spills out and you only have so much chalk with you, it's a big deal. So anyways, that container, smaller, fits in the cup holder, and it's never spilled. So anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.